Good morning, wherever you are on the planet, or good evening, good afternoon. I have just finished a circle with the women that are doing my Inner Goddess course. We did one last night for those that were finishing their 7-month course. And yeah, the shifts were just incredible. And then we started the new intake this morning, their first live call. And I can't not love each woman as she shares because, the irony is when we dare to share the parts of us that we fear are unlovable, that's when we're actually at our most lovable. It's kind of counterintuitive, but when we try to hide the parts of ourselves that we fear will be rejected, will be considered unacceptable, um, we compensate, and people sense that insincerity or that lack of authenticity. And we may not know that we're being inauthentic. We may work so hard to create this social face, this mask, this persona that we think is acceptable, but it will never be as lovable as us really bearing our soul and showing the world who we are, warts and all. And this is radical self-love. Now, easier to say than do, especially when we've been reared in a patriarchal culture which is ruled by the mind. And the mind, by its very nature, is critical, okay? Its role is to be the protector. So it's always surveying and scrutinizing and trying to identify the problem. So if we're seeing ourselves through the two eyes of the rational mind, we tend to pick, whether that's our appearance or whether that's being hard on what it is that we create, over scrutinizing, overly critical of what we create, feeling it's never good enough. But this is to do ourselves a great disservice when we see ourselves through the heart, okay, or the one eye, but through the soul. Then we become more compassionate towards ourselves. And one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about sitting in circle is that was what enabled me to shift from hating on myself, self-loathing, to self-acceptance. Okay, because you don't just go from self-loathing to, oh, I love myself. Yeah, you've got to move into self-acceptance and then self-appreciation, and then that blossoms into self-love, self-honoring, cherishing the self, celebrating the self, so and I get a hit of this every time I sit in circle. And the reason is, when we feel truly seen, we feel truly loved. And so every time I sit in circle with women and we share from the heart, not only do I fall in love with each of them, but I feel deeply loved because I feel deeply seen. When someone gets us, when they really get us, when they understand us, that's when we feel loved. And so often in our busy, hectic lives, everybody's focusing on their agenda and what they've got to get done and what they need and what they want. It's only, when we make a dedicated space and time to be present to the soul and to hold a space for the soul to come out and be seen, to be witnessed, to be heard, to be understood. And this is why the practice of circle, sitting with others, whether it's with sisters or with brothers or a mixed circle, it gives us this, it helps us to grow love, to become more loving towards ourselves, towards others, because when people share and expose what is potentially shameful for them or embarrassing, or fearful for them, you can't not open your compassionate heart and your empathic heart. You can't not feel them and feel one with them, meet them in the heart. And this creates connection. And the more connection we have, the more fulfilled we have, the less addictive we are, the less neurotic and anxious we are. So, it's hard to make that leap from being overly self-judgmental, self-critical, to self-loving without the repetition of a practice, because that's how we learn, through repetition, through cyclic learning. Every day as a child, you're like, well, I've got to brush my teeth morning and night. Or we learn through the cycles of, well, when it's winter, I've got to dress warm. And when it's summer, I've got to drink more water. We learn through cyclic repetition. So by showing up every month and sitting in circle, we're practicing being more benevolent and kind towards ourselves. And despite the narrative, being kind is not a state of separation. Being kind is a state of connection, of coming together and really honoring each other by really listening, active listening, not just lip service and you're busy thinking about what it is you're going to say next. So, this is why I'm passionate about the practice of the red tent. And there's a year-long journey starting at the coming new moon, which is April the 11th or the 12th, depending on your time zone. So that's coming up in 6 days. And this practice, we literally go in and we own the shadow. What does that mean? Well, the shadow is the part of us that we feel should be hidden, okay? The part that we're like, people knew I sang gibberish in the shower, they may not think I'm so cool, but the parts of us that we fear are unacceptable, that would be mocked, ridiculed, rejected, ostracized, considered weird, eccentric, and daring to let those parts out in a safe space, okay, means that really this is the most radical act of self-love, the ultimate risk to go, will you still love me if I show you this? And if we do it in a safe space like circle, it's not going to come out in erratic ways in relationship, okay, which then can really create trauma triggers for people, if their shadow isn't received well, okay. And so, I think the most profound shift that I ever had in my life, with the exception of being introduced to the archetypes that together comprise the feminine psyche, was sitting with women for a number of years, every dark moon. And by sitting with the same women, okay, a trust grows, an intimacy and a bond grows, a safety, okay, and you become more and more safe to be able to let them see more and more of the part of you that perhaps only your family of origin or your cat sees or your dog sees. And letting people see your human frailty, how broken you are, how wounded you are, and being accepted in that. That is the gift of unconditional love. That is what we all deeply yearn for and crave, true love, finding someone that will love you unconditionally. But here's the thing, that is us seeking the mother, okay? The love we felt as an infant when we had somebody who loved us, regardless of whether we shat in our nappy, our diaper, for those that, call it a diaper, or screamed, or, it's like we felt loved, ideally. So we've got to give that to ourselves. It's not appropriate that we expect others to love us unconditionally. They are not our parent and we are not an infant. It is appropriate that we have conditional love between adults, that we have healthy boundaries, that we say, that doesn't feel good, I'd prefer you don't do that. So it's not a mature and realistic expectation to just say, I'm going to treat you however I want and you're going to love me unconditionally. But we need to develop unconditional love for ourselves. And it's much easier to practice this in a circle of sisterhood or brotherhood where the stakes aren't as high as they are in an intimate relationship, which is the source of a lot of conflict. As I said, when our shadow aspects come up and we're like, oh, don't know how to deal with this. But the more we practice acknowledging these aspects, welcoming these aspects to be seen in circle, the more mature we are in all of our interpersonal dynamics, whether that's relationships with work colleagues, with family, with neighbors, with our kids. So it's through acknowledging the shadow that we take back our power. I was saying to one of the women in the circle this morning, it's kind of like we must name the fear. We must look at the fear directly in order to stop running from what it is we're afraid of, the compulsive behaviors, whether that's overworking, overdoing, overgiving, overeating, being on social media, over socializing, shopping, all the busy doing. And a lot of that is because we don't dare just stop and feel and face ourselves and face the boogeyman, which is the part of ourselves that we feel is unlovable. So if you would like to sit with me every month for a year, journeying around the moon when she's at her darkest phase, which is what evokes the shadow. It brings up the wounded part of us. And we're in that phase now, or we're coming down to that phase now. This is the last week of the lunar month. And so this is when we have less energy and when we're more easily triggered, when the wounds really start to come up. And it's the testing time for ourselves and our relationships. But if we have a practice, if we have a circle to go to where we can acknowledge what's coming up, okay, what's being evoked by the dark moon in that sign, because every time the moon is in a different new moon sign, it brings up the shadow traits of that sign, regardless of when we're born. So this is an opportunity to see all of the shadow traits in ourselves. It's an opportunity to become Zen, to become so self-accepting that we will not be judgmental and intolerant of others because, hey, guess what? I've got that trait in me. I've got the potential to do that. So this helps us to be more loving. People that don't want to look at the shadow, no, I just want to focus on love and light. That is denial, okay? That is immaturity. That's like a child who's scared of the dark. If we want to be truly loving, we must look at the dark. We must seek to understand it so that we can process it, okay? And we can sit between the pillars of light and dark. So we can make that inner marriage of light and dark, like the yin yang symbol. And this was the gift of the sacred feminine, which of course was demonized by the empires because guess what? They feared the power of the feminine, because a populace that is mature, that has these cyclic practices to look at the dark, will never be manipulated out of their own fears. And so this is an act of power to look at that which we fear the most and to grow beyond it, to become larger than the fear. And this is the invitation right now on our planet as we see the shadow becoming larger than we've ever seen it before. And this is because it's time for us to acknowledge it. It's time for us to grow up. It's time for us to face the darkness within ourselves and in all facets of reality, so that we can respond appropriately and from a centered place. So, yeah, if you're curious to join me, I'll put the link in the description, and it would be my honor to hold that safe space for you to explore the parts of you that you fear are unacceptable and grow your self-love. So thanks for listening. Feel free to share it if there's someone that comes to mind intuitively that you go, you know what, I reckon this could be a timely share for them. All right, ciao for now, everybody.